first speaker, Koh Cha-Ly, is the CEO of PropertyPriceTag.com. Today, Cha-Ly brings you the secret atlas of Greater Kuala Lumpur. Over to you, Cha-Ly.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Cha-Ly. I'm the CEO of PropertyPriceTag.com. I see that the slides have been fixed. Before I start my talk, I would like to ask everyone here, does anybody not own a smartphone? Well, nobody. Okay, great. So everybody has a smartphone, right? Now, does all of you have a Waze or a Google Maps on your phone? Who has? Like everybody, right? Great. So if you think about it, most people, they use Google Maps and Waze to find the best directions to somewhere. So somebody tells you to meet somewhere, they give you a location, and then you turn on your Waze and your Google Maps, and then you think of it as something to guide you there. Because nobody uses a map anymore, right? Who uses a map? Nobody, great. So, this Google Maps and Waze is actually slightly more than just a replacement of your traditional map. It is actually something quite transformational for urban planning. It is something that actually empowers you as an individual person to shape the city. Think about that for a second. What do I mean? See, every time you put in a direction and then you say, a location, and you say, find me the fastest route to get there. Waze will tell you if there's an accident up front, or which is the route that will take you there fastest or slowest, and some other person is actually feeding data into a central system, and then it's shaping your decision on how you will place, where and when you will place your car. And that in turn iterates to something else. That is the power of big data. Big data can help you shape the city in ways that we cannot imagine 10, 20 years ago. 10, 20 years ago, we have, our traffic consultants might still be doing that today, stand in the corner of the road and do clickers, LOS, level A to F, to determine traffic congestion. But today, this practice can all be possible with an app. Now, imagine if we can do that for planning and architecture. Imagine all this data that's being fed somewhere can be used by all you architects, all you urban planners, to think about how we are placing permanent structures in our city. Then we are at the age where knowledge is shaping how we can build sustainable cities. So that was a very, very long introduction of what my company does. So our company basically harvests data, cleans, because unlike US and some other countries like Australia and New Zealand, we don't have the luxury of clean data. And we basically process the information, a large amount of information in real time to make analysis possible. So all those things, you're saying blah, 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 all this data, what does that mean? So it means that I'm feeding key stakeholders, I'm trying to help key stakeholders understand the city in which they are building in a more sustainable manner. So what is this secret atlas of Greater KL have to do with your company and, my company and, what am I presenting today? So the book actually was a very interesting result from a meeting that I had with Think City. So Think City, old friend, basically came to me and said that, Cha-Ly, what you're doing is actually quite interesting, but how you're presenting it sucks, okay? So it's so boring. Nobody wants to look at pie charts and line graphs and box whisker plots that we are taught in university. Nobody wants to, look at that. So they said, they challenged me to communicate the big data that I had to the layman, to every single person. Why is that important? It's because information and knowledge empowers. And you cannot empower somebody if they don't understand it. So, hence the book. So today we're going to explore a little bit about this book that we published in April this year, available in all bookstores and also downstairs in level 1. But the question is, what treasures did we find in the book? So the idea is we will try to explore Kuala Lumpur, Greater Kuala Lumpur, in which this conference is in, and see what are the quirky behaviors of KLites. So what did we do? First thing we did was, we took the property transaction data. So everybody buys and sells data, sells homes, and the assumption here is you can't actually transact a home without actually having one to begin with. So we use property data to track how the city has evolved from 1970s, 1980s onwards. So in 1970s, as most of you know, we are a river bank city. So from the Klang and Gombak rivers, the civilization grew hundreds of years ago, but main townships grew from there as well. And then in the 1980s, there was mass rural-urban migration in Greater KL, and most people preferred housing at that time was terrace housing. So to lower down costs, most developers will look for flatter, I would say flatter, relatively flatter land to build terrace houses. So most of the flat lands in 1980s was conquered. And then in 1990s, as technology and high-rise costs was better, people started to to infiltrate the slopier areas. And by 2000, most of Greater KL has been explored, and the black spaces you see there is either palace grounds or forest, planned forest reserves. So that's simple, evolution. But we like to do something more quirky. So this is a map we call the Nasi Lemak Index. What does that mean? It means we track all the mamaks and the kopitiams all over Greater KL, thousands of them, and we find what is the probability of you finding a mamak versus a kopitiam in your neighborhood. So in green, basically illustrates that you're more likely to find a kopitiam, and in red, it means it's more likely that you'll find a mamak, and in yellow means you have a 50-50 chance. So this is how we look at different parts of our neighborhoods to understand what's really happening on the ground. This is the cafe index that Dexter mentioned just now. So what we did was, we looked at the cafes. Does everybody here know what a latte is? No? Okay, great. You don't? Okay. So a latte, has this great culture in Malaysia. We like to import most cultures from abroad, as is what we like. And latte is a new thing that we like. It costs 12 ringgit for a cup, which is also 2 nasi campurs or 2 chicken rice. So who pays for them all the time, and why are there 10 cafes in your local neighborhood? The reason is because of disposable income. So we correlated the number of cafes to home prices, and we realized that every 2 cafes that opens in your neighborhood increases your home prices by regression model that by 1%. So we took it a step further and we said, okay, is that for all neighborhoods? Are all neighborhoods expensive when there's a lot of cafes? Well, there's a correlation, but what we did here was we mapped the areas where there's high density of cafes per square kilometer, and we compared it to home price per square foot. And the things that are in black basically means that there are a lot of cafes, but home price actually hasn't caught up. What does that mean? It means that maybe there's a large number of student population there that could be home buyers in the future. There is large amount of disposable income in the area. Lots of things, but what we want to see here is not to do the conclusion, but we want to show you what data can actually inform you on how you understand the neighborhoods you're designing for. So we also look at things like age, right? So most of you guys are architects or designers, and then you'll say like, okay, client comes and tell you, I want to build this family home. But what kind of family? Is it under 6 years old family, under 15, under 20 families? Or is it for aging families? So what we did here was we mapped the number of kindergartens per square kilometer to understand whether that neighborhood, that family neighborhood, is it a young family or an aging family? And as you can see, it seems that there is the first suburban ring here, and the first suburban ring seems to have more number of kindergartens per square kilometers. In the book, we talk about two hypotheses, basically. The first hypothesis is that there is a reset of generation, which means that this first neighborhood suburban ring in which in 1980s was where people started moving in, they are now having children of their own. So the children of those people now have children of their own. And they're basically buying near where their parents are or their in-laws are because of our Asian family values. That's hypothesis number one. The second hypothesis was this yellow strip here is actually right along Federal Highway. So a lot of Federal Highway neighborhoods are actually transforming into commercial zones. So it could be young families are actually dropping their kids there before they go to work, and that's part of the life cycle of it. We don't make conclusions, but we want to show you how data can actually give you clues to design for the people that you want to design for. Then we also try to look at funny things like tamachais and 4Ds. We mapped out the number of tamachais, 4Ds, and lucky lottery centers. And we found out, and then against home prices where it's 650 and above, turns out that most rich people's neighborhood don't have many of these establishments, these symptoms, except for Ampang. So what does that really mean? The conclusion here is rich people don't need luck lah. Okay. So this is something that we like to do in the office. I like to look at different ways of visualizing data. And this exercise, I challenge myself to this new thing called a radial histogram. So we think of space as distances, right? So what we did was we take each individual transaction. For example, if you have a house in Taman Tun, and it was transacted at 550 ringgit per square foot. Average Taman Tun is 500 ringgit per square foot. So that specific transaction was 10% above market. If another transaction was transacted at 450 per square foot, that would be 10% below market. Okay? Understand? So, sorry, that was illustrative. There's no way you can get 500 ringgit per square foot in Taman Tun anymore. So, you can see here, what we did was we mapped each transaction to the cemetery, distance from cemetery. So when you're 500 meters from the cemetery, we found out that most transactions transact at 8% below the neighborhood. Not the whole of KL, below that neighborhood. And then once you're in 1 kilometer radius, it seems like it doesn't quite matter, it even has a positive sign. So what does it mean? It means that the ghosts only matter if they can fly to you. If cannot fly to you, it's okay, because cannot see. So, great. We did this same thing for shopping malls and parks. So every developer is asking us, our architects, to say, build a shopping mall, I want to put an office tower upstairs and 2 condominiums, because the shopping malls does increase home prices by a certain amount. But so does the park. You see, we love our parks as much as our shopping malls, so maybe we want to build more parks. Maybe that could be something to consider, since the correlation of prices seems to juxtapose. But I have to qualify that I actually included landed housing as well. So the numbers are not only for high-rise. So if certain people come and tell you, like, no, from my experience, high-rise is 20% above, this specific high-rise is 20% above market because of the shopping malls, they are only one data out of my hundreds of thousands of data. So each individual is affecting the market, but doesn't determine the market. So this is another map that we did in order to visualize how many shopping malls there are. It's a very simple exercise. What we did, we just mapped out every shopping mall that we can find. We cleaned out all the Giants, Tesco's, and Aeons, and then we just mapped it out. Because everybody tells us that there is a lot of shopping malls out there, but really how many? And even if we tell them the number 155, oh, okay, 155. But once you show them how many shopping malls there is, the reaction is slightly different. So sometimes in our professions, we talk a lot, we say a lot, we write a lot. But when you visualize it, there comes a time when it becomes slightly different, the reaction becomes slightly different, because you're actually communicating. So this always doesn't project very well on projector, so consider looking at the book later. Basically what we did was we mapped out in a heat map the price of houses across Greater KL, and we correlated it to all the MRT, LRT that is being planned and also already constructed. Turns out, disappointing to me, that at the time of 2015, in which this data that I used, for completed stations, there was only a 1% negligible correlation to being near to a station. And for incomplete stations where construction was still going on, there was a negative 6%. Obviously, I would love that people want to be near MRT and LRT and being near the station, but the reaction seems to be slower than we think. With the new MRT Sungai Buloh to Kajang and the next one to Putrajaya, I hope this will transform with the new network. So this is numbers that I feel I personally would wish would change over time. So previously we talked about 20 stories building being dense. I think somebody from Selangor government actually told me that, and I sort of chuckled. Because if you map out all the 20-story buildings, everybody's 20 stories already. 40 stories is now the new 20 stories, and 70 stories is now the new 40 stories. So talk about fashion. There's no point talking about 20 stories because everywhere is 20 stories already, and we sort of correlate that with the river just to tell you where it is. Very little. If you want to look at under 20-story buildings, it's rather a gem. So that's all I have, just to give you guys a taste on what is the book about, what we do. It is really an appetizer on what data can do for you. And I really encourage all of you guys to take a look at how information beyond the site that you're looking at or beyond the locality that you're looking at, the neighborhood, the neighboring lots and the views that it blocks, to something bigger, because what you are inputting into the city will shape it, just like how when you decide to drive a certain route suggested by Waze will affect another driver. So hopefully I've given you guys a little bit of appetizer on what we do and what big data can do. Okay, thank you so much for having me today. Hopefully you guys enjoy the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Cha-Ly, for the insights.